And joining us this evening, my name is Karen Tucker, and I'm the CEO at the Churchill Club. And our program tonight is called The Internet Content Explosion, Challenges and Opportunities Ahead. As we know, use of smartphones, connected personal devices, the Internet of Things, video, and more are escalating. In fact, a recent report predicts that more content will cross the Internet in 2020 than all the Internet years prior to 2013 combined. With this escalation comes new opportunities, new challenges, and we have two of the most insightful people on the planet with us to examine what's ahead and share their freshest insights. And they are, of course, Tom Leighton and Geoffrey Moore. We thank our valued partner, Accenture, for hosting us in their San Jose Tech Labs. This is a beautiful place with a beautiful view and a great place to have a visionary conversation. A few words about Churchill Club, a nonprofit technology and business organization operating in the Bay Area since 1985. Our work is to ignite conversations that contribute actionable new insights to help advance innovation, economic growth, and social good. And we know that you, our audience members, value conversations that are future-focused and that transcend brand. So on your behalf, we choose topics that are rich with opportunity and not already over-discussed. And we always ask our speakers, we respectfully request that never do they promote, pitch, or position, but rather share new information and fresh insights that can expand our thinking. We are corporate and individual supported, and we welcome you to get involved. If you're tweeting, please do use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you will find other Twitter codes in your bulletins. And let me now ask Kevin Collins, our good friend from Accenture who heads up web scale services here, to come up and introduce our speakers. Kevin.
Thank you, Karen. And before we get started, let me just say on behalf of all of us at Accenture, thanks to you and to Churchill Club for all the hard work that goes into putting on these insightful sessions over and over and over again. So thanks for that. So as Karen mentioned, our speakers tonight are Tom Leighton, CEO of Akamai, and Geoffrey Moore, who many of you have probably heard of already. I'm going to keep these introductions very short so that we can get right to the discussion. There are full bios available in your bulletin there, so if you want to get more details, please just open those up and take a look. As a young applied mathematics professor at MIT, Tom Leighton co-founded Akamai back in 1998, sort of anticipating internet congestion. Now, this is a pretty prescient call, given that it's just 7 years or so after the web was publicly introduced. So pretty amazing call. Since then, he has led, as CEO, Akamai to $2.2 billion in revenue, with servers in 1,400 networks around the globe. And if you look at it, a bright future ahead clearly for Akamai and Tom and his contributions to our industry. Geoffrey Moore, sort of speaker, author, and advisor, someone that many of us have heard of. He has written 7 important and best-selling books, from Crossing the Chasm back in 1991 to Zone to Win just last year. Actually, incidentally, I had to go and fact-check that date when I saw it in the bio, because I remember reading Crossing the Chasm on a beach in South Florida when I was a young guy trying to figure out the digital economy, and I just can't believe that was 25 years ago. So anyway, clearly one of the world's leading experts in helping us figure out how to develop strategies in rapidly evolving industries like the one that we face here. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Tom Leighton and Geoffrey Moore.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Kevin. Well, this is one of my favorite things to do, is to be able to have conversations with industry leaders at a Churchill Club event. So once again, I'm here. I'm delighted. So, and by the way, FYI, so I was on the board of Akamai from 2007 to 2015. So Tom and I have actually had a conversation or two already. We're somewhat familiar with each other, but not everybody's familiar with Akamai. And so, with full respect of Karen's request not to pitch the company, just, we think of you as a content delivery network. I mean, you're best known for that. But just give a description of what's the full portfolio of businesses at Akamai.
Well, our goal is to make the internet be fast, reliable, and secure. And so that if you try to buy something online or you go to watch a movie or sporting event, what really is happening is your browser or your TV is connecting to one of our servers near you. And we provide that content to you. So it is a good video quality or the transaction's really fast. And then we also keep the website from being taken down by a denial of service attack or being defaced. A lot of folks want to put their message on a popular website. And of course, that's not such a good thing. And we keep that from happening.
I think that's great. In that context, Kevin mentioned you have close to 250,000 servers and 1,400 networks. I guess the first question you'd have is, why would anybody let you put your server in their network? What do the networks get out of this?
Well, it improves the performance for their end users. Because if we have all this internet content stored or made available near to the end users in their network, the end users are happier for a lot of the content they want. And it saves them a lot of money. Because if we've got stuff there, they don't have to pay the charges to go upstream for transit to go get that content. It offloads their infrastructure and saves them money and makes their end users happy.
So this is something I did not understand for a long time, is how the workload gets distributed across the internet. And these servers effectively create a way of amortizing the workload across many networks instead of having one network get caught with that responsibility, which I think is really, really valuable. When you were doing that early math, just as the last question to kind of go back to where Kevin was, what was the principle at the very beginning? What was the thing that you said? What was the congestion idea, the congestion removing idea? Because I think that algorithm is still, in some sense, operating behind the covers even today. But can you characterize that? How would you characterize that?
Yeah, the original problem actually was proposed by Tim Berners-Lee, whose office was down the hall from mine at MIT, and this was in '95, and already, Tim had figured out that web congestion was going to be a problem. That if you had a popular website, that a lot of people would try to go there at once and get content, and that would flood the site and flood the internet. And so the question was, well, how do you keep that from happening so a lot of people can get the content they want simultaneously? And so distributed computing, distributed storage of the information is the approach you'd take. And then how do you make all that work? Because you can't store everything everywhere. That's not going to work efficiency-wise. How do you make it so you can take all this content and make it seem like it's immediately available to everybody, wherever they are?
Cool, that's great. Well, anyway, it's a $2 billion business, pretty amazing. And then one last thing before we get into some of the topics that we're going to nail up here. So because of this capability, because of having 250,000 servers and 1,400 networks or thereabouts, you carry an enormous amount of internet traffic. What percentage of the internet on average, do you think the Akamai carries on a typical day?
It's hard to know because it's hard to measure the base.
Yeah.
But we do carry a lot. I think all the top 60 commerce sites use us. There's a couple big video sites that do it themselves. But most of the rest of the name brands would use our services. There's some countries on some days where the majority of the traffic would be ours.
Yeah.
Other days, not.
The reason why I'm mentioning this is at one point I think we were thinking it was on the order of 20% on an average day. The point being, they basically see the internet. I mean, it's hard I'm trying to think anybody else. Does anybody else have a better view of the internet traffic than Akamai? Who might it be? Who else would have? See, it doesn't. Okay, so the point is, pretty interesting view on what's on the thing. So now the question is, so what do you see? And that's kind of what the point of tonight's conversation is about. So I want to kind of start there. So one of the things we're talking a lot about in this valley is the architecture of computing is becoming hyper-concentrated in the mega clouds. So the Google Cloud, the Amazon Cloud, the Apple Cloud, the Facebook, potentially Azure, whatever. And my question was, is that changing the topology or the shape of the internet?
Yeah, it's causing a lot of disruption, and a lot of good. all enterprise applications are in the process of moving to the cloud. So that totally disrupts, the model of an enterprise network. Traditionally, the enterprise IT manager has a network connecting the branch offices, typically a hub and spoke model. There's some core data center, all the branch offices connect to it through an MPLS network or private network. The applications all sit there in that core infrastructure. All the security connecting to the internet is done there. And so if you're in a branch office and want to go to the internet, you go over the private network to the core data center and then out. That whole world changes. And I think as you look forward, the notion of a private network is going to completely change. You'll just go from wherever you are, either mobile or in the branch office, straight out into the internet to go wherever you want to go. All those services that were in that data center are all going to be out in the cloud, including security. Will move out into the cloud. On the other side, it's putting a lot of load, for example, into the peering points. As you think about video, actually there's tiny penetration today of internet video. Our kids are probably all watching all their videos on devices now and over the internet. But almost all the watching is still over the traditional mechanism. But as we evolve to a world where half of TV watching is over the internet, it's not going to come from those cloud data centers because there's just not enough capacity in the backbones and in the peering points to get anywhere near your neighborhood. And you already see this playing out with the big fight in net neutrality in this country. A big movie company a movie aggregator will say, oh, that carrier is thinning my traffic, and they're not being fair. And very successfully lobby the White House to get laws passed to say the carriers can't do that. The fact is there's too many bits in all the high-quality movies. If you all want to go home and watch a decent quality movie over the internet, not enough capacity there. And no matter what the carriers do, they can't afford to put enough there. You got to change the model. So it won't be coming in the long run out of these cloud data centers that we're all familiar with.
So it'll be some cached architecture of some kind.
Has to be.
Whatever it would be.
Yeah.
So the enterprise, boy, that when you just said that thing about the enterprise, I'm playing that out with, I have shares in Cisco. Am I supposed to sell those? I have shares in HP. Am I supposed to sell those? So are you in conversation with companies like Cisco and HP and Dell and whatnot about the implications of that for them, or do you engage with them or not engage with them?
Those companies are all good partners.
Okay. So what do you have any sense of how they're responding to this?
Well, not to talk about those guys, but you do see a lot of the box companies that are smaller scale now moving, hiring bankers, going private, being sold, because their world is turning upside down. Yeah. They used to sell a box to the enterprise IT manager, and the enterprise IT manager would own and operate it. And it would speed up the WAN, it would protect, the core enterprise network. And that world's going away. It can't work anymore when the app is sitting in the cloud.
Yeah.
Because you don't control the other end. It's who knows where it's going to be. And so that's putting a lot of stress in their business model.
So what do you think? So given that, whenever you sort of push down in one area and reduce a problem, it pops up someplace else. So if we're taking the bottleneck out of the hub and if we say the hub and spokes ultimately became a scalability bottleneck. Great, got it. Cloud, got it. So now where's the bottleneck going to be?
Well, you see it in the peering points.
Okay.
What
is it? Say some words about a peering point. I'm not sure that's a phrase that everybody.
Oh, okay. So, when you have two networks and they need to send traffic from one to the other, they go through a peering point. When you have a cloud data center, there's only so many of those. You get transit pipes connecting into the data center. And you have companies now where they try to bring a lot of those together in the same building.
Right.
So you can connect to other networks. And the problem is that the amount of capacity you can get into those is small, tiny, compared to all the capacity in the last mile networks in the homes. So if you add it up, probably all of you have at least 40 megabits a second into your home, probably 100. Some cities now where you have gigabit a second connections into your home. if you added up all those home connections around the world today, probably 10,000 terabits a second. Now, people, now that you have that nice fat pipe into your home, you want to watch an HD movie over the internet. You want to do a lot of things to use that. You look at all the core data centers, and you look at the core backbones of the big carriers, it's a tiny percentage of that, and so it's lopsided. And so and today the way it works is for every bit you get into your home, every bit that shows up in a pixel in a movie, that same bit came from somebody to send it to you, is the way the model works. And if those things are all in a small number of places, it can't work.
Yeah.
You know, so.
We were going to try, at one point, there was an idea around peer-to-peer networking, that maybe you could really democratize it all the way to the edge. How did that play out?
Well, peer-to-peer, people think of BitTorrent and intellectual property theft and stealing music and stealing movies.
Hey, that's a tradition in our part of the world.
Well, yeah. You know, the content
Napster,
guys
come on.
And the carriers don't like that so much, you know.
I can say.
So we don't use that word. We call it client-assisted delivery.
I see. Client-assisted delivery.
You know,
see, this
and that's a good thing because you save cost. We highly control it and highly secure it, and it actually can improve quality because if I can deliver the movie into your home where most of the bits come from your neighbor, that's a short path. There's plenty of bandwidth there. You're going to have a great experience.
I am.
And it's not going to cost anything because, well, he already has his set-top box on all the time.
Okay, so the movie's already on his box.
The movie's there. His box is always powered on.
Yep.
It can always connect to the internet. He's already paid the kilowatt hours for it.
Yep.
And so it's free, cost-wise, to deliver from
both
his box.
Yeah, I get it.
But
but you have to know. But you have to know that it's on his box.
Yes, we have to organize the whole thing, and we do. We're on today over 100 million boxes in homes. There's some countries where all like Turk TV in Turkey.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
So if you had, if 100 million, what would be if I wanted to make that a fraction of the world's boxes, is that 1%? Is it 0.01%?
Yeah,
it's tiny. Okay.
We want to be a billion.
Yeah, obviously,
to really solve the problem.
Whether it's Akamai or anybody else, you want somebody out there. By the way, you did mention the traditional telcos. So as you describe this new landscape, I'm Verizon, I'm AT&T, I'm Telstra, I'm Telefonica, I'm Orange, whoever I am. Let's not do mobile yet. Let's do kind of the more traditional telcos. How is this playing out for them? What's their world?
It's fascinating, and you see it playing out with Verizon now with, buying AOL, buying Yahoo, buying a whole cloud stack. Now they're selling or in the process of getting rid of some of the cloud stack. But moving in the content direction, advertising, information about the users, trying to monetize it that way. And the problem the carriers face is being commoditized at the bottom.
Right.
And they worry about being called a dumb pipe. They're providing an incredibly valuable service. Without it, none of this works. But how do they move up the stack?
By the way, a sewer is a dumb pipe, and we do appreciate our sewers. I just
no,
want to be clear.
It's very valuable, but the problem is fighting commoditization.
Yeah.
As things get built on top.
Yeah.
And so they're working through that. And now with the enterprise networks, that's under threat. It hasn't gone yet.
Right.
But you see that happening with the apps moving to the cloud. You don't need the enterprise network in the same way you did.
And that MPLS was a cash. I mean, that's been a very profitable business for those guys, and it sounds like that's going to.
So they're trying to figure out what's the next generation.
Right. Which is, it sounds like they're either trying to be more like Google or more like Netflix. I mean, I'm either going to sell content or I'm going to sell advertising.
Well, yeah, you got Google coming in from the other side.
Yeah.
And Facebook buying pipe across oceans.
So if they're a telco, so they want, but they're going to have, wow, okay. So in the middle of this, we also talk about over the top, and that was a phrase I think the telcos in particular. So how do they think about over the top, or how does the OTT and the telco architecture interact, or does it interact?
Well, it's coming over the telco. You
Yep.
see, AT&T, DirecTV, again, is part of that evolving landscape. So over the top, well, there is, if you're mobile, could be different, but then preferably Wi-Fi. But into your homes, it's the carriers bringing that into the home, and the key, they're trying to figure out, okay, how do they control the monetization as it moves over IP?
And so are they embedding you in their networks to do like this client-assisted delivery, those kinds of ideas? That's where that's coming from.
Yeah.
That really is a really different architecture. I'm going to move on to some other topics, but anybody have any questions about basically the topology of data transmission is changing pretty dramatically. And just anybody have any questions for Tom around this to follow up on that? Because I think it's going to, I mean, just think about how much money is going to move from company to company given what he just said. But I can't see very well. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you, by the way, I'm going to ask some more questions and then it's your turn. I don't work for, this is a volunteer position. So it's at some point, you guys are going to step in. So just get ready. I'm going to move on a little bit, but you're going to be cold called here in a minute, so careful. Well, I made the point earlier that Akamai sees a lot of the internet traffic, and it has implications for security threats. So I guess the general question I would say is, we hear a ton more about cybersecurity now than we would have 10 years ago. Obviously, the volume of threats has gone way up. Anything else you would say to characterize, has there been a change in the landscape other than just more volume?
More volume, more sophistication. Today you have nation states, very active in cyber attacks. I had my entire tax history stolen from the IRS. This is presumably a criminal organization. They filed a return on my behalf.
Well, that was huge. Thank you. Did they get a refund?
They got my refund. And in fact, they made it much larger than it would have been. And a lot of people were caught.
Would they split it with you? Or
no?
No. Okay, I just saying.
But it's a mess. Once that happens to you, it's a disaster.
Wow.
My entire history of government-related employment stolen, probably by a foreign government. And there's everybody, whether you know it or not, you've had your identity stolen in some form. 80 million Americans, their whole medical history stolen in the Anthem attack. So you've got governments, you've got organized crime, you've got groups like Anonymous that are loosely affiliated that take on popular causes. And that's a bad one because even people that wouldn't violate the law can join in on those causes because they seem reasonable. And a virtual sit-in sort of sounds like a real sit-in, one being illegal, the other being a core part of our culture and democratic society. So you got all that big, smart organizations perpetrating the attacks. And it's a lot easier to attack than to defend. And the defenders are way, way behind right now.
Is there anything that whether it's Akamai specifically or an Akamai-like entity can do to support the defenders?
Yeah, so today we stopped denial of service attacks. A few years ago you'd read about the North American banks being taken down by groups out of the Middle East for long periods of time.
How did they do that?
They would flood the website with traffic, basically, with requests. Today, the most popular denial of service attack is called a reflection attack. Basically, what it means is, I'll do an extreme example, not so extreme anymore, but I'll be the attacker. I will send a message to your refrigerator saying that I want to set up a session and talk using the standard protocols. Your refrigerator does the right thing and says, okay, let's talk, and sends a message back, except that I didn't give my return address. In that field of the return address, I put the target's address. And so all of a sudden you have all these devices that are coming online with good bandwidth, good CPU, communication stack, bombing this target with saying, yeah, well, I'll talk. And there's other things like that, that with just an initial thing, you can have that entity launch a lot of traffic towards your target. So that we can stop, because we have this large set of servers and we just absorb all that.
Wow.
There's other attacks that we stop today, defacing attacks. And so like for the Olympics coming up, we carry that traffic. So if you watch a sporting event online for the Olympics, you'll be connecting to one of our servers, and we'll be giving you that video, or giving you the site and the scores and so forth. There's entities that want to put their message on that site, and of course, the owners of those sites don't like that. So we have to, filter that kind of stuff out. There's people who want to steal credit cards if you're doing transactions online, so we stop that stuff. We don't today stop you from downloading malware, getting phished. I got phished, I'm embarrassed to admit. 6 months ago, finally clicked on that damn link. Yeah, blew up my machine. It was, never to be seen again. So we don't stop that today. Data exfiltration from enterprise networks, we don't. But that's an area where we want to get into.
So part of this thing, there's a bot piece of this thing. So talk a little bit, at least, are bots still as active as they used to be? Or?
Oh, more. No, right now, at least a quarter of all traffic and transactions are not human. And for a lot of the big websites, more than half is not human. And that is going to grow dramatically. So it won't be long before it's almost all automated agents. And today we track 1,300 different types of bots, and we don't begin to know them all. And some of them are good. A Google search bot, well, you want to give it a really fast response and make sure it has the keywords so you get ranked well. There's price scrapers, trying to figure out if you're a commerce site, what sale prices you're using so they can undercut you by a penny. There's bots trying to steal stuff, trying to bomb your site, all different kinds of bots. And in fact, we have a new capability where you want to tailor your response in a website based on the type of bot.
Yeah.
And first you say, well, you just want to block the bots. That's bad. If you block the bot, the person who owns the bot detects that and says, okay, I got to morph the bot to get around the block. And so really today the defense is you want to feed the bot something that looks like what they want, but isn't what they were trying to get. You got account checkers.
This sounds a lot like how we're battling cancer, by the way, or bacterial infections. Wow.
Well, account checkers, we're all bad with passwords. Who can remember 50 passwords? I can't. So you end up often using the same ID and password across multiple sites. So one of the sites gets hacked, you lose it, and now they go check that at other places like credit cards, the IRS.
The friendly IRS now, yes.
Yeah, and they want to know, is it valid?
Yeah.
And if it's valid, then they can go sell it to somebody else to perpetrate the attack. And so, so there the game is, if you can detect it's a bot trying to check the account, you don't want to just deny it. You want to say it's invalid, right?
Oh, right.
Because then they'll say, oh, it's worthless, and
throw it away.
Yeah, so it's crazy out there.
Now, is that your business, or is that somebody using the Akamai business to put themselves in business? Or?
No, we do that today.
Wow.
We done that for a government revenue agency, not in time to save me, but because you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well. Okay. A couple more things, and I'm gonna open it up. We've talked a little bit. I deliberately set aside mobile, but mobile is the new. Is going to be the new platform. I'm spending some time with the folks at Microsoft, and their whole world, they've obviously had this incredible franchise with Windows computers and Office software, but neither of them work very well on a mobile device. Windows isn't there, and Office is a little hard to, type of. So the world's moving, and they believe that the primary platform for the world will be the mobile device. So from the point of view of the network traffic and the implications for the network, what does that mean? How does that affect things?
Well, I would argue it already is, because over half the transactions we carry are now mobile.
Is that right?
And it's been that way for a year. Now,
wow.
Almost all the mobile is Wi-Fi.
Okay.
About
not cellular.
Not cellular. Now, cellular, maybe 15% of traffic. Now, you go to other parts of the world, and that's all you got is cellular. Now, the big problem with cellular is the last mile is not 40 megabits a second.
Right.
It is tiny. Now, if you're the first person to be on 4G or LTE, you can do 100 meg, you can do great things. But
don't just shoot your neighbor.
Well, but the aggregate capacity coming out of the tower is just tiny, and that's a big problem for cellular. And one that we need technology to figure out, how do you get around.
Is 5G going to help, or is it just going to be?
No, when you go up one of those levels, first it takes forever to really get ubiquitous, but 3G to 4G was a little over a factor of 2 in aggregate bandwidth. Now the latency's got better. If there's only one person connecting,
God bless.
got much higher bandwidth, but aggregate bandwidth was small increase. And, you know, because the system originally was built for voice. And voice is, you know, 8 to 16 kilobits a second. And now everybody thinks they got that cool new device. They think it's supposed to be better than the clunky thing on their desk, you know, and it's supposed to work when you're driving in the car. You know, a typical web page can be 2 megabytes. That's 16 million bits. And you click, and you think it's supposed to come in a second. That's 16 million bits a second, right? Against 16,000 bits a second is what the system's built for.
I believe that's 3 orders of magnitude, but maybe I'm
Three
an
orders of
English
magnitude.
I'm an
Or
English
you think
major.
you're going to watch a sporting event or TV
Yeah.
as you're walking around?
Yeah.
You know, minimum megabit a second, but probably you're downloading 2 or 3 megabits a second.
So what is the strategy? Well, what is the industry strategy for coping with this? Or is
This
there
is a
one?
big problem.
Okay, so it's
You know,
not,
there's in your data caps. You know, that's going to be a technical challenge. And there's mobile broadcasting, multicasting, maybe if watching a lot of stuff. What we do a lot of is try to figure out what you're going to want, and when the phone is on and has a Wi-Fi connection, then
you can use it as cache.
yeah, you jam some stuff into it when nobody's
Interesting.
watching or cares.
Interesting.
And then now when you're roaming around, you've got a lot of what you want maybe there.
So does the telco have to give you that? How do you get my number when I'm on Wi-Fi?
Well, we don't get your number, but maybe you have an app on the phone.
Okay, so the app
And we detect, and the app has some company like a media
Yeah,
company
yeah.
or a news company, and we sort of know what you want based on what you did, and we know you're in Wi-Fi, and so on behalf of that media company, we'll put some stuff there that.
And Wi-Fi is better because Wi-Fi basically is just the end of a line network. It's just the
Big fat last mile in your home.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
got 40 megs or 100 megs in your home. Wi-Fi is fine, and so that's fine now. You can really get content into it.
Mild entertainment question. One last serious question. I'm going to throw it up. Pokemon Go. Does that affect anything?
It just shows you never know what's coming next and what's going to be really exciting and popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
There's a church in Cologne, Germany, that is suing Pokemon because they won't take their lure out of the church. Okay, last question. So, you've been doing business in China for how long?
oh forever.
Yeah, it's kind of what I thought.
Since 99.
So the point, I spend a bunch of time with international. Everybody I spend time with is still sorting out, particularly how do you do business with China in China? I mean, we're all doing business with China in one sense or another, but doing business with China in China, how did you fare? How have you fared in that market, and what have you learned from that as you've gone through it? Or
Yeah, it's complicated. You can imagine being a company in high tech, American company doing content distribution. That's very problematic. In fact, in China, you can only do that if you're a Chinese-owned company. And so you have to partner. And so we don't own our servers in China. We're a service provider to them. There's all sorts of rules about what content can be on the server that we have to respect. We have to respect the rules in every
their
country,
rules.
of course.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because any of our customers have to have a Chinese license to have their content on our servers in the country, and they make mistakes. Without them knowing, content that could be illegal in China can get in there, and that's a mess. That's a pain. So it is. I think it's very hard. And now there's potential for laws where foreign companies would have to give all their software over, give all the secret keys over, and that's a complicated thing, and not so good. So it's really a complicated landscape there to do business.
And the main thing you're doing right now is helping Chinese companies get their data out. Is that the more popular
Well,
thing?
we do deliver in, and we do
deliver
have
out.
Chinese customers, including the government, where we deliver content out.
Yeah.
We don't deliver content yet sourced in China to China, but we'll be doing that in partnership
China
with
Telecom or one of those telcos.
CTCU and so forth.
Sense.
And in fact, China is important to figure out. It is now the world's largest internet market. It's bigger than the U.S.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And a lot of our customers, the big retailers, especially the luxury brands, China is their biggest market.
Yeah.
bigger than the U.S. now.
Yeah, yeah. Because China reminds me actually of the U.S. in the 50s and 60s. They're having a materialist boom, and there'll be a whole generation that's going to buy every material thing they can buy going forward. Okay, so pretty interesting guy, I hope. Huh? So challenge him or a question. As you can kind of tell, he knows a lot of stuff. So questions you have about the structure of the internet, the future of the internet, what's going on in the internet. I can't see very well because we're staring into blind. So if there's a microphone, raise your hand, and this gentleman or this lady over here will help you with the microphone. But you got to ask the question. Otherwise, he'll think that Silicon Valley is dumb. He's from Boston. He's from MIT. I'm from Stanford. This is a serious problem. Go ahead. Yes, yeah, please.
Is China adopting what we're doing, is the expansion occurring? Is the expansion occurring according to your predictions? And I don't understand the control of where the stuff goes.
China has internet companies just like we do. They connect with the American companies. The volume of traffic in China is enormous. It is a very large company with a lot of internet usage.
Is the contraction of China, is the contraction of China slowing this down? China's having its
economic contraction.
Or are they insulated from that?
No, there is a contraction, especially among some of the luxury brands. So there has been, some traffic, less growth there, I would say. But overall, China on the internet is a booming market.
So let me do a follow-up with that. So we hear a lot about WeChat and the world. When I bought one of these things, I thought you're supposed to do this, and then I learned from BlackBerry you're supposed to do this. But with WeChat, you're supposed to do this. So it's conversational, and people are spending all their time doing this. Do you see WeChat, or is WeChat any part of your world? Do you have any visibility into this?
So yeah, we do work with probably most of the large, Chinese companies, but we would have a very small fraction of their business.
Piece of that. It turns out that conversational interface is going to be a big change. Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, Patrick Planner from SAP. When do you think we are going to hit doomsday of the internet, where there is not enough space for all the traffic, and how much time do we have to find a solution?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a doomsday kind of thing. You're already seeing the congestion here in the U.S., but also in several European countries at the peering points. And that manifests itself when you're trying to watch an internet movie and you can't get it at 10 megabits a second. You see the picture isn't quite as HD, it degrades some. Maybe you're down to 3 megabits a second. And you can notice that. If you have a nice TV, you'll notice that. That's already happening. But I think that's where technology companies come into play with a different way of doing the distribution of the content. To overcome those limitations. So at the end of the day, I believe that technology will advance so that we can enable, the internet that we expect and we'd all like to have.
So just to follow up on that one, so I think about water is going to be a big challenge because most of my life water has effectively been free, and human beings will consume a free resource until it is exhausted. There's a version of that on the internet, right? I have a right to all the bits in the world. Do you think there's a monetization, some form of tax, whether it's commercial or government, it doesn't matter, but do you think that'll be part of the way that will meter the internet or no?
Well, you see it being fought out with net neutrality. Who pays who? You got the movie provider wants free access into the carrier.
Yep.
But the carrier's got the expense.
Yep.
And on top of it, the carrier's competing in some cases with the movie provider. But if you can get a law passed, say the carrier has to give free access, so they're already fighting that out. Who pays who?
That does seem unfair, although I get the liberty. So let's play that out. So if I get a law passed that says I can make the carrier carry my stuff, that does seem a bit unfair. So, but the counter argument that actually gets the law passed is what?
Well, that citizens want to watch the movies.
Okay.
And have access at high quality.
And that's a right, or that's a public utility?
Wants everybody to have equal access.
Yes.
You can have new ideas get out there and not let some entity control it.
Yep. Yep.
Because then maybe it becomes a walled garden and you only get the stuff that carrier wants.
And we certainly experienced walled gardens. We definitely had that era for mobile as well.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. Please.
Yeah, actually, it's Roger Chen from USF. Actually, you probably recovered some of my questions just through your early discussion. I'm interested in knowing the implication for the power distribution within the internet, because these days we know a lot of platforms, they're like a very huge, big winner takes all. Do you see this kind of more and more content in the internet? Would that give the power to the big players much more and really hurt the small guys, the innovations, those kind of things? Do you have any thoughts or share with us?
That's a great question. There are, a relatively small number of gigantic companies, and as all the applications move into the cloud, enterprises move everything there. The question is, will media go that way? And I don't know. The media companies are very worried about that because then everything is owned effectively by those gigantic companies, and that can create a different kind of world. Generally, I think it's better when you've sort of got a distributed ecosystem of power and capability, so there's not a few controlling everything.
So we have a very U.S.-centric view of the world, and in Europe and Asia or Latin America, is it the same phenomenon, or is it in some way categorically distinct from what's going on in this country?
I think, a lot of the other countries in the world have a dominant carrier that is controlled by the government, and so that is a monopoly in some sense. And as you see in Europe, they're actually worried about the big American companies taking over everything, and you see some pushback against that.
They'll just prevent that.
Privacy issues, of course, are very big. Who controls the information about the people?
Do you have a service related to privacy, or is that something that fits in the architecture of an Akamai-like entity, whether it's you or someone else?
Yeah, well, we don't use any information about users except for security. So if you've done bad things to attack sites, we will use that potentially to block access to other sites.
Yeah.
But we don't do any kind of advertising or information use like that. In terms of keeping content within a country, some of that naturally happens, in our network. So we wouldn't ever want to take content out of a country and bring it back in.
They talk about data. I mean, the European Union's got a lot of stuff about data sovereignty, and German data has to be managed in Germany and data centers in Germany. Does that affect your architecture or your service in any way?
We're naturally set up to do that. So there's no laws passed yet. If they were, we'd have to change how we do billing because information would come to a central billing location. But the actual delivery of the content, if it's starting there and the user's there, we're going to want to keep it there for performance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Other, yes, please.
So you mentioned...
Hey, introduce yourself just because it's kind of fun to know who's.
My name is Chad Olson. My question is, as far as increasing the bandwidth, you mentioned quite a few times that there's the last mile is kind of a bottleneck in the network. How do you see increasing the bottleneck, size to the last mile? Is that a software issue? Is it increasing more backbone, more high-speed fiber and stuff to the home? Or is it really just increasing that number of pairing points between different networks? Like, kind of, what does it look like to actually try and solve that problem? Is it a hardware issue, a software issue, or something along those lines?
Yeah, so the bottlenecks in the core, for the landline internet, the bottlenecks in the core, in the data centers, and you got a lot of capacity out going into the homes. And you're not going to solve that through hardware. It's just way too expensive. You're going to solve it through software and the content distribution on the basis that most of the content is in video and software. Most of the bits are in video and software. And more or less, almost all the bits are popular software and popular video that a lot of people are watching. And so you'll send that into a neighborhood or region once or twice, and then from there it'll spread. So it's done locally, not everything coming from the core of the internet data center. So it'll be handled through the architecture of content delivery and storage, and that'll be largely software. It's not going to be building bigger peering points, because you just never get
So
there.
who will host that? Will that software have like local Internet of Things micro data centers, or what will host it?
Well, so I'd like it to be us.
Yes, yes, yes. No, I got that part.
No, but I think, so our, the vision out there is we have software on every device.
Okay.
So we're in every home on the set-top box.
Okay,
we're
so
in
there's
the
compute
garage,
power right there.
in every branch office. There's a ton of computing power.
Okay.
All
That's
the
not the
Internet
problem.
of Things, everything is going to have strong
Okay.
computing power, good communication stack, always on, always powered, and it's a gigantic fabric that you're using to move information around and to store it effectively. So it's a gigantic brain that's managing all that.
So let's talk a little bit about machine learning then, because that would break. Well, my brain would break very early, but I think it would break any human brain if we're not careful here. So do you have algorithms that humans have created? Do you also have machine learning? So do you have ways to improve the algorithm sort of automatically by letting the machine see how things are going?
Yeah, and it's, the reason the brain can't do it is because the brain's sequential. It's centralized.
Yeah.
It's got to be distributed computing.
Okay. So it's like my autonomic nervous system, not my cerebral.
Right. There is no one place that's computing everything.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Great. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Tina, and my question is, do you feel that there's any research or governmental institutions that you might be working with that would help you with these problems that you've indicated? And I'm just curious if you've got a vision for who some of the companies are who are working on these solutions. DARPA funded Akamai before we were Akamai in terms of research at MIT. Of course, they started the internet, so that's a great, example. NIST supports a lot of standardization work, which is important. I think the government could have a better role in cybersecurity. I think the government tends to classify that stuff more, and that's, I don't think, really helpful to advance the state of the art. It would be nice to see them fund more public research around cybersecurity.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, Simon Knight. You mentioned that the last mile is less of a constraint, and in the context of peer-to-peer, it seems like that last mile for domestic users is getting more asymmetric. I've got 20 times more download than I have upload capacity at home. Do you see that as being a barrier to really making peer-to-peer serving of data work?
Yeah, potentially in some cases if it's really out of whack and you have very limited upstream bandwidth, but that's something that can be modified.
By the box owner, by
the carriers,
yeah,
can manage that. And if it's not so much, if you have enough to get a video out, then you're in pretty good shape if you can get to that level. But that can be an issue in some cases. That's right.
And it's in the carrier's interest, if necessary, to give you that upstream bandwidth in order to.
The other approach is to use multicast and pre-position the content. And multicast in this country is only supported by AT&T in some locations. Most countries it's not supported.
What is that? What's the difference? What's the idea?
Multicast, what happens is, especially think about it in the context of a live sporting event. So, today when you go to the Olympics, each one of you can go. We will send a different stream of bits to each one of you. You could imagine a different world where we send one stream of bits for the event, and it hits a router and forks and creates multiple streams coming out, then hits routers downstream and they fork again. So one stream starting from a server keeps getting forked by the routers into 1,000 streams. And that's much more effective because you could have all the people in the neighborhood watching it. It only went into the neighborhood once.
Yeah.
And that's the key, that the core only sent it once to get a lot of people at the edge.
So we hear about IP version 5, version 6. Do either IPv5 or v6 help multicasting, or are they unrelated?
That's unrelated. So v4 is what we had for a long time.
Yep.
And that's where the IP addresses are 32 bits.
That's right.
Which isn't enough anymore.
Right.
And v6,
128 bits. Yeah. Okay, but it doesn't help the multi. So who would have so multicasting sounds like an obvious thing to want to do.
Yeah.
Who has to?
The carriers have to turn it on.
Okay.
And it can either
The expensive way is a router upgrade, which you wouldn't want to do, but there's a way to do it with a software upgrade in the routers.
Okay.
And then you got to have the right software in the home then
Yeah.
to receive it.
Okay. Seems like that's a reasonable future.
No,
I mean,
it makes
does
perfect
seem
sense, yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
I'm Elizabeth. I have a question. I frequently travel to China, and because the government, there are ways to go kind of climb over the firewall, but if you don't use that, I've often felt the Chinese internet is quite a bit different from the internet we see here in terms of contents, the portals we have to go to. Do you think China is a special situation? Do you see that elsewhere in the world? I guess my question more broadly, do you think the internet is going to become more regionalized and every country or region will have its own kind of unique internet experience?
Great question.
That is a great question, and that is a fear, I guess, that you have the balkanization of the internet. I don't think that's going to happen. I think China is a special case. There are other countries that have content restrictions. But China is special also because they're the largest, country in some measures in the internet. But I don't see that happening in Europe. There's South America. You hear a lot of talk about it in Brazil, but I don't know that it's really going to get that far. And there's something that some treaties now, like the Pacific Trade Treaty. We're all hearing about it in the press now because it's become a campaign issue about jobs. But in fact, that was a great treaty in terms of preventing, where I think 40 nations in the Pacific agreed not to balkanize the internet and have free flow of data. And it is unfortunate what happened in the politics, because here you had a Democratic president who negotiated it, and that's pretty rare, and a Republican Congress who generally support free trade. So it was the perfect situation to get that kind of treaty passed, and now it became a political football in the election where both sides are against it and it's probably dead. But that would have been very good for the internet to prevent balkanization.
So by the way, another force in the world is obviously Islamic fundamentalism. Is that having? Do you see any impact of that on the internet? Or
yeah, the groups that are supportive of that cause are reasonably sophisticated in attacks and do launch attacks against Western infrastructure and try to corrupt content, bring sites down. So they're pretty well known for that. So we see a lot of that.
And did they have public policy about the use of the internet in their country?
That I know less about.
Okay.
And we don't have servers in some of those countries.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. To couple, there are two here. Where the gentleman? Okay. And then there's a person behind him next. Yeah. Thanks. There you go.
Thank you. Patrick Browner again. So in terms of security, now where is the security about our data, but the security about this terrorist group moving over the internet? Do you see you as a checkpoint where you have some responsibilities to monitor and alert, or do you see that you have to stay neutral? And the extension of this question is, do you think companies like Apple or others
yes, right.
who have some data acquisitions on their devices should also share or help to share this data?
Right.
Yeah, well, that's another great question. And I won't comment on what Apple should or shouldn't do. But if you're an entity and you're attacking sites that we defend, we will keep track of that. So if you go to other sites, we'll make that information available so we can defend those other sites.
And if a government asked you for that information?
When there's attacking entities, we share the attacking IP addresses
Profiles
with.
And is it mutual? Is it bidirectional? Do they share with you too, or is it one direction?
Yeah, no, it's more we share with them that these entities
their version of sharing
did
is
bad things.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if they really do anything with it.
Right. Okay.
But it's not personal information.
No, I get
it's
it.
not your name or credit card or address. It's IP address.
Blacklist.
Based.
It's blacklisting, right?
Yeah. So if this IP address has done these bad things, then we don't want them to be able to keep doing it.
That reminded me of a question. So you said half of the traffic on the internet might be bots. If I'm buying advertising by the click,
yeah.
and I'm selling to robots.
Yeah.
Do you provide? Do you see? How do you see that how do you see the digital marketing industry responding to that problem?
Yeah, there's two big things happening with advertising. On the one hand, you have ad fraud, where bots are clicking and raising
And showing
the
a
bill.
lot of interest, by the way.
Yeah. And on the other side, now you have the ad blockers.
Okay.
And so it's estimated now there's $40 billion worth of ads that don't get monetized because they're being blocked.
Okay.
So that's the ad space is evolving in an interesting way. And overcoming ad blocking becomes a technology problem, something that
Yeah.
we're looking at.
Yeah.
And defending against ad fraud because of the bots. If you can tell what the bots are, maybe you can say, hey, those weren't real.
Got it. I think there was I thought I saw another hand. Oh, okay, great. We're getting close, but I think we have time for Karen, a couple more questions? Good.
Thank you. Tom, Lou Sarto. So you're an intermediary, and as such, principal agent conundrum. How do the telcos fear you? And in fact, what would they do? You've mentioned multicast. What might be other mechanisms to disintermediate you so that they can control the entire process?
That's a great question. I think if you go back 5 years ago or more, I think the telcos didn't like us very much, and we weren't as friendly with them as we should have been. And today, a core part of our strategy is to support the telcos in their mission. Even if we'll sell them CDNs. If they want, we'll operate them for them. And so really the telcos are our best friend, and I think now their view towards us has changed. Whereas 5 years ago, most of the major world's telcos viewed us adversarially. They had competing CDNs. Now pretty much all have standardized on our technology base for their content delivery businesses. So we're very close to the telcos. We're strategic partners with almost all the telcos around the world.
So what about a Google, though, or a Facebook, or a Netflix, or an Apple? I mean, huge. How do they see you?
Well, they're customers,
Yeah.
so we provide services to them. In some cases, we can compete. Some of them run CDNs that are competitive.
But mostly in service to their own content, I would think.
Most of them. And Amazon would be
Okay.
competitive with AWS.
Yeah.
With Azure, you can click to buy Akamai delivery on Azure, but they also have a competing CDN.
Okay.
So I would say some of them are competing just for their own content. Some compete for third-party
And we've been saying
content,
content, but you did mention that you also accelerate like a retail transaction,
Yeah.
which doesn't strike me as a content-heavy thing. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's not caching a movie
Yeah.
or a software download. And actually, half our business today is accelerating transactions. And so
What's the problem? Why? What slows down a transaction? How do you? Yeah.
Yeah, well, if we weren't involved, you want to buy something, you got to go to the data center that would process the transaction. That can be far away, can be slow to get there. Every tenth of a second is several percent in conversion rate.
Yeah.
And so if we can make that transaction be faster, you buy a lot more. And that's why the top 60 commerce sites, when you go there, really you're coming to us. We use our own protocols to get back.
So how do you do that? Because I get how you would cache content, but this is a dynamic transaction.
Yeah.
What do you do?
So we built our own virtual internet on top of the real internet. We use our own routing protocols on top of the real ones.
Wow.
We use our own communication protocols on top of the real ones. And we use our own application layer enhancements so that it makes it be much faster even if we cached nothing.
Wow. So we're talking a lot about software-defined networks. I mean, I realize that's not normally what we mean, but
That's
okay.
what it is.
Karen, I think maybe one last question. Okay, yes, please.
Hi, Tom. My name is J.L. Mitra. So my question is about differentiation. As an individual or a business owner or decision maker, I've got several CDN companies to choose from. And out of all of the major players in CDN, both established ones like Akamai or up-and-coming ones, how are these CDN companies differentiating themselves from each other in order to retain their current customer base or win new customers?
Great.
Well, for us, it's based on speed. If you're doing a transaction, if you're doing a movie, it's based on the video quality. Do you get rebuffers? How often? How fast does it start up? It's based on reliability. Does it always work, or do you have failures from time to time? It's based on security. Is the site really protected against a denial of service attack? Is it easy for somebody to hack the site? And do you stop that or not? So that's how we would differentiate.
And you're positioning yourself as a premium, the premium
Yes.
player. If I were funding a different kind of CDN, is there another way to attack this problem where they'd say, Akamai's Akamai, God bless them, I'm going to do something different and differentiate in some other dimension? Or is it just price?
Well, price, can be one that, do it for a lower price. I think some position, in terms of DevOps, easier to use.
Oh, okay.
And Fairpoint.
Yeah,
We're making ourselves easier to use now.
Yeah. But AWS might want something more along that line.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Just swipe the credit card, you're up and going.
Got it.
Now there, it's not functionality rich.
No, right. Right.
So
different game.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Karen, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Just a couple things.
But first of all, before I do, do you want to do that?
Well, I would like to, on behalf of our audience, to thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Certainly, Tom, for coming out to talk to us tonight and for sharing your views so generously, and Geoffrey for, as usual, leading the conversation so graciously. We have for both of you, as a small token of our appreciation, the Churchill Club speaker T-shirt.
Whoa!
Geoffrey, I think you've got one for every member of your family.
I do. It's good. It's good.
A recording of this program will be available on the Churchill Club YouTube channel within a couple of days, where you'll find recordings of most of our other programs as well. We hope that you find that to be an extremely useful resource. And please be sure to join us for our biggest annual event, the Churchills, on September 22nd, where we will acknowledge and hear from a game changer, a global benefactor, a legendary leader, and a magical team. And there will be surprises abound, and it will be led, emceed by our very own Geoffrey Moore. So we hope that you will join us for that. And you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much, and see you soon. Good night.